First officer's capacity to search for potentially conflicting traffic was also constrained. The ability of the airplane flight crew to notice the approaching helicopter in the final seconds while engaged in these primary tasks was further degraded by the helicopter's low conspicuity, complex background of cultural lights, and by the helicopter's lack of apparent motion in the visual scene. This concludes my presentation. Staff is now ready to answer your questions.
Thank you very much. We will now move to board member questions. We'll start with Member Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I want to pick up with visual separation as it applies to the helicopter operator. It was clear from the interviews we did and the investigative hearing and other information uncovered during the course of this investigation that all helicopter operators in the DCA Class B airspace had come to expect that they would request visual separation from DCA tower almost immediately. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
That's correct. And that, I want to iterate this point. It wasn't just Army. It was all the civilian operators also, according to Mr. Dresser's witness statements in the hearing.
That is correct.
Okay. Was it also true that in an interview with the Army standardization instructor pilot post-accident, he stated that he and other pilots he knew would request visual separation from traffic that they had not yet visually acquired?
Yes.
Are pilots allowed to request visual separation from traffic they have not positively identified and acquired according to FAA regulations?
No.
No. I'm kind of amazed by that comment in the interview. You being a long-time pilot as myself, and I think Captain Stone in the back, long-time pilot, when you're given a traffic call, what are you to do? And what is your response to air traffic control?
Yeah, once you receive a traffic call, then you search for the traffic and you identify it. If you can't identify it, you tell traffic that you have negative contact or that you do have visual contact.
Okay. Would you agree with that, Captain Stone?
Absolutely.
Absolutely, yeah. And if you're still looking for it, you maybe make some comment like that I'm looking for the traffic. But once you identify it, and then you ask for visual separation, are you required at that point to keep your eye on that traffic?
Absolutely.
And if you lose the traffic at any point, what should you do?
You'll have to notify ATC that you have lost the traffic. Yeah, traffic is no longer in sight.
Would you agree with that, Captain Stone?
Yes, that is correct.
Did that happen in this case?
No, it did not.
Did not, no. I like that you pointed out the fact that it would be pretty much impossible to pick out which one the traffic was in your visual study out there. Now, 15 seconds prior to the collision, the helicopter IP, they were about a mile away from 5342. A requested visual separation, is that correct?
I believe so, yes.
Do you believe, or the rest of the team believe, that they had sight of the correct aircraft at that point?
We don't believe he had sight of the correct aircraft.
Yeah, I would agree. And unfortunate for them. Do you think if they, and this is an opinion question, if they had sight of that aircraft where it was, they would have made some kind of positive control movement to deconflict with the aircraft?
Absolutely.
Had an appropriate safety alert from the air traffic controller, would that have helped in this situation?
I believe it would have, because it would have directed their direction they needed to look for the traffic. So they would have looked in the 1 to 2 o'clock position for the traffic, and they would have possibly identified it.
I agree. Do you feel, and I'm going to ask this of Dr. Bramble, do you feel the lack of the circling call that they did not hear, the helicopter crew, Do you think that played into them not being able to visually acquire the aircraft?
I do think it had an impact, yes.
Now, they did, as far as we can tell, did hopefully hear 3-3, but how do you think that played into this at all?
So they were high workload at the time, calling out cranes in the middle of a turn. The instructor was giving the pilot feedback on use of paddle, and they heard this partial transmission that said the CRJ was going to 3-3. Realizing that was going to conflict with their flight path further on Route 4, required them to do a fair bit of thinking about the transmission, and it appears that they didn't process that information very deeply, just thought that target is a long ways away, we'll worry about it later. If they had heard the word circling, that would have been a salient cue that something unusual was going on here that they might need to keep an eye out for.
We'll talk more about this when I come back. I'm done. Thanks.
Thank you, Member Inman.
So, and I just want to establish something, I guess is a little bit of a baseline. Bryce, have we established what we believe to be the exact altitude at which this crash occurred?
Yes, I think we have. I think we believe it came together at 278 feet. Is that correct, Ms. Diaz? Yes.
Okay. I just wanted to try to get that. Now, Captain McKinney, I want to go back to your presentation, your deck, and it was on page, I just want to clarify something. It was on page 25 that we stated PAT 25's pressure altitude was 100 feet lower than other recorded altitude data. But then on the next slide, we say on slide 26, likely indicated altitude 100 feet lower than true. Do we have a difference between what we verified and what we know to be absolute?
Between the absolute altitude of what the aircraft was at versus what we believe they thought they were at?
I'm sorry, one slide says that it was 100 feet lower. The next slide says likely was 100 feet lower.
It might just be a statement, but the FDR recorded pressure altitude, if you made the correction for the local barometric conditions, was 100 feet lower than the other altitudes. And we believe that that is likely what they saw on their altimeter.
Okay. I'm just trying to get to that area because it's whenever we say likely and was, sometimes that can be a little bit different. So we indicated, at least in the airworthiness report, that flight testing by Sikorsky found that the installation of the external store systems would increase this position error, meaning that would change possibly what the altitude would be. Is that correct?
Yes. When you install the wing tanks, it changes the pressure dynamics around the outside of the aircraft and can lower the recorded pressure altitude.
So is there any way for a crew to mitigate that, or do they have to just take it into account and know that it's there?
I would pass this to Mr. Shin.
Shihun?
For the UH-60L, the crew would have to take that into account mentally in their mind.
So is there anything in their, at least pre-flight or training or manuals, whenever they know they're going to have stores, that they would pre-brief or at least indicate that or make it aware between the crew?
That information was not in the UH-60L operator's manual.
So they just kind of have to know?
We don't believe they knew, since the Army did not have that published in the manual.
Okay.
And we have a recommendation in that area.
I understand. I'm just trying to build into some of the, as we said before, there's not individuals. This is a systemic issue with a lot of manuals and a lot of policies. How do they educate Army air crews on the position error when they will encounter with this ESS? Is that in their flight training? Is it passed down? Do we get any information of how flight crews would know this?
They wouldn't know it. It's not in their manual. It's not in the training.
Okay. So in the I'll go into a different area real quick. So we did some discussions in regard to ADSB and the alerts. And I guess if the helicopter, So let me go back. If an ADSB display indicates a traffic advisory or an RA, does that override a controller's instruction as a pilot?
Yes.
But earlier in the last panel, we showed where it needed to be an emergency, or it had to be something in regard to the FAA circular, specifically what the controllers are told. And no pilot in command may deviate from that unless an amended clearance is obtained, or emergency exists, or the deviation is a response to a traffic alert and collision avoidance system resolution advisory.
Yes, if it's coming from an ACAS system and it's a resolution advisory, then the pilot is authorized to deviate from the ATC clearance by the FAR that you had up on the screen earlier.
So I guess my question is, if we ask them to lower the RA threshold from the 900 feet now, does that mean that all air traffic controllers will have to be retrained, as will pilots?
There will be training, yes.
I'm just curious if that injects additional risk.
There's always some risk associated with that, but I think the staff has thought this through and think there's much more benefit to it than risk.
I'm not disagreeing with your recommendation. So don't let me think that. I'm just trying to make sure we get all the facts out there.
Thank you. Good thing we have an FAA that will, when doing rulemaking, determine any risk and address that risk, including training needs. When you are flying an MSL route, Mr. McKinney, would you be using your barometric altimeter?
Yes,
That's what you'd be referring to?
that's correct.
And could the left seat pilot have easily observed altitude indications on the opposite side of the cockpit?
It will be a little difficult, but they can see it.
Looks a little difficult from...
Across cockpit, yes.
Yes, we actually did an observation in the simulator. It was very difficult to see the instruments on the opposite side because they're inset and you'd be looking from the side.
Correct. So 17 seconds before collision, the aircraft were about 0.84 nautical miles apart. The helicopter's recorded radio altitude was 281 feet. They would have thought, given our assessment that the barometric altimeters, they thought they were 100 feet lower. They would have thought they were below 200 feet, correct?
Correct.
6 seconds before collision, it was 266 feet. Again, they would have thought they were under 200 feet.
That is correct.
4 seconds before collision, 278 feet. Again, they would have thought they were under 200 feet. They would have not known.
That's correct.
Okay. So we have established that they thought that they were below 200 feet. We conducted 3 flight demonstration flights. All 3 showed barometric altimeter readings that were 80 to 130 feet lower than true altitude. We also looked at the ESSS, which would add an additional 30 feet. Were the instrument, and so we've got instrument errors, we've got position errors, and then from rotor downwash, right? And then we've got some adjustments for temperature on the day. Were the instrument and position errors known by the Army? Army, not the pilots.
Yes.
How about the pilots?
No.
Should they have been?
Yes.
Would it have made a difference if they actually knew they were below 200 feet?
I believe it would. They would incorporate that into their training, and then they would fly a more appropriate MSL altitude on those routes.
So you have this tolerance stack of a bunch of instrument position errors. You've got temperature correction, which all add up to this 100 feet. Then you've got the addition of 30 for the ESSS. What is the Army doing to address this?
They're adding that information into their flight manual for the pilots.
Are they going to not just have it in writing on a manual, but actually train their pilots accordingly on what to do there?
I believe so, yes.
Yeah, okay, so 100 feet difference may not make a difference in Afghanistan, but it certainly makes a difference when you're on helicopter Route 4 crossing civilian aircraft on approach to landing to runway 33, where there's only 75 feet of vertical separation. There's zero buffer, nothing. Yeah. Dr. Bramble, can you talk a little bit about your expertise? You're a national resource specialist for the NTSB. Talk about your expertise in human performance and some of your background.
Sure. I have a PhD in human factors from an interdisciplinary program in psychology and industrial engineering, and I worked for a flight safety, a flight training and simulation company for a few years. I've been at the NTSB for 27 years, investigating major accidents for the last 24 years, and I chaired the Human Factors Working Group for the International Society of Air Safety Investigators, and I currently chair the Government Specialist Subcommittee with other human factors investigators from 10 other countries.
Do you believe the limitations of see and avoid, which we've referenced back to 1968 in numerous investigations, 96 alone within the past 2 decades, could be overcome simply by telling a pilot to do better, pilot diligence in scanning for traffic?
No, we need to do a better job supporting pilots in that task.
And I'll come back to that. Member Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I want to go back to trying to figure out why PAT 25 crew didn't positively identify Flight 5342. Dr. Bramble, can you explain what expectation bias is?
Sure. It's sort of related to confirmation bias in that when you have a strong expectation about things going a certain way, you tend to notice confirming information and overlook disconfirming information.
And is expectation bias a well-known vulnerability in human performance?
Yes, it is.
Yes, we see it a lot, don't we?
Yes.
Captain McKinney, did Army 12th Aviation Battalion flight crews receive any specialized training on the route structure, including approach and departure paths at DCA?
They did not receive specialized training. The training they received was general aerial familiarization, and of course, their basic airmanship. They'd recognize, runway alignments and traffic in that way, but there's nothing specific about DCA.
Okay, so would it be fair to say that their expectations for where traffic would be arriving and departing from at DCA would be driven by their experience?
Yes.
Okay, rather than formalized training, correct?
Correct.
Okay. As we pointed out in that table I had up earlier, table 18, we see that about 90% of that traffic, even at night, going on a north flow, landing runway 1, majority of that traffic was landing on runway 1. So with their prior experience, I would say the majority of the time, if not almost all of it, they would have been seeing traffic landing on runway 1 and not on 33. Would that be correct?
Yes, that's correct, and that's what we heard in their statements also when we interviewed them.
So, Dr. Bramble, would that lead to some expectation bias maybe?
Certainly, that's a perfect setup for it.
Yeah, I mean, I might have a little theory here and be speculation, but I don't think that hearing anything on 3.3 or the circling before 3.3 would have made a difference in this case, unfortunately. Knowing what expectation bias is, and if you don't have that traffic initially, but you're looking at a line of lights, that may have led them to continue to look towards runway 1 immediately. Just, it's a theory, but we don't know, and we'll never know. Let me move on to Mr. Wagner. I want to talk a little bit about ACAS XR. How has ACAS been adapted for the rotor wing aircraft?
ACAS XR is different from previous iterations of ACAS in that instead of just offering vertical maneuvers to aircrew. It offers also horizontal maneuvers. And additionally, the committee that's writing the minimum operational performance standards is looking at having significantly lower inhibit altitudes for XR when compared to XA or XO, for instance.
Okay. And you said it's commercially, it's not available at this point, correct?
It's still in development, that's
Okay.
correct.
What are minimum operating performance standards or MOPS?
So minimum operational performance standards, MOPS, those are basically a set of criteria that an organization like RTCA develops to say what a company would need to verify that their product meets those standards in order to get a certified product.
Have those standards been developed yet for ACAS XR?
They are in development currently.
Okay, so my concern is the simulation that we run, what performance standards are used? Is it these ones that maybe they're thinking of having, or what do we know? What are the performance standards for the simulation?
So the simulation used performance standards that they are still in draft. There's some ability to modify those. However, in speaking with the committee chair just a week ago, he stated that they intend to have the standards finalized by December 2026, so within less than a year from now.
Okay.
So we believe that it's mature enough technology that we can make recommendations in those areas.
So the simulation software is a best guess at this point of how it's going to be, the standards are going to be?
I wouldn't characterize it as a best guess personally. I think that there's still a couple small things that they need to validate before they finalize the standard.
Okay.
I think Captain Stone may be able to offer a little bit more information.
Be quick, I'm past my time.
No, I would say the standards are 95 to 98% complete, so they're much more than just in development.
Okay, and how long have they been developing this for?
A long time.
Long time? Okay, thank you.
Member Inman.
I want to go back to this. This was actually an evaluation flight. So we know that there's evaluation going on, and I'm kind of concerned or wanted to figure out, maybe this is human factors or actually an expectation bias. But we noted 27 mentions of wind and turbulence, a brief loss of the crew coordination on who was flying, a failed landing, and a pilot-initiated wrong turn, all during this evaluation flight. At what point does an instructor pilot say, we need to knock it off? It's time to end.
Well, this was a proficiency evaluation, you're correct. And so the pilots being evaluated on their ability to fly the aircraft, manage cockpit resources, navigate, and whatnot. I think as an instructor pilot, doing an evaluation, you're looking for an unsafe action or situation where you would call it knock it off. Otherwise, I think most instructors just continue with the flight.
Do you think instructor pilots are given enough latitude or at least direction on when they should knock it off?
Yes, that's totally their decision.
I know it, but are they given enough training in that regard?
I believe so. They're specially selected because they have good judgment abilities.
Do you think that this IP was empowered to end it, despite evaluating a senior ranking official?
Absolutely. He was the instructor pilot in command.
Okay. In their pre-flight risk assessment, do they take into account how many hours a pilot has recently flown?
Yes, they do.
And how is that weighted?
They use a risk assessment tool called an RCOP, and then that information is automatically integrated into the risk assessment tool, and a risk rating is generated. It's based on how many flight hours they have, the recency, in what modes of flight they've flown and whatnot. So it's automatically generated.
And I think we've heard that all the crew members aboard both aircraft were qualified to perform their duties. But is there an attempt or a bias in order to try to know that we've got a deadline to get this done, we need to get it done regardless of what happened?
We did not, the investigation did not reveal anything like that.
Okay. Okay. This is just for my awareness too, and it was interesting whenever we, unfortunately, we do listen to the CVRs to make sure that we're getting the tone and tenor. And I've always heard of the sterile cockpit rule that applies under 10,000 feet for commercial aviation. Can you describe that?
Maybe Captain Stone can, he's a airline pilot.
Yeah, so it's below 10,000, usually it's 10,000 feet. Some airlines have it up to 18,000 feet, and it's basically only operationally significant information can be discussed. So you can't have a conversation about where we're gonna go eat tonight or anything like that. So it's gotta be directly related to the safe operation of that flight.
Does the same thing apply to military or to helicopters?
Not with helicopters, no. Because you're
in general?
operating below 10,000 feet almost all the time.
So it's a different risk for a helicopter than it is for a fixed wing airplane?
Different risk.
They're treated differently, I should say.
That's correct. You know, helicopter operations are typically low altitude. You're always going to be communicating with your crew on the situation of the aircraft, looking for traffic, navigating and communicating with each other about what's going on. So yeah, that's always going on in a helicopter.
Okay. And I know we talked a little bit earlier about the bias that these pilots had not been seeing aircraft arriving on 3-3 very often. Did we have a number of ATSAP reports on that? Did we find where this was specifically more defined at night? Do we have any data on that?
I think that's something that we'll be covering in the next panel.
Okay. I'll wait for the next round.
Thank you. This may be for Mr. Hoyt. Hi, Nathan. Welcome to the discussion. All right. So I referenced in my opening statement a 1968 Midair collision, and again in '69, which was the worst air disaster in Indiana and remains so. We just passed not a few years ago the 50th, the mark of the 50 years since that occurred. And I mentioned the board's significant work in 1968 and '69 to hold mid-air collision public hearings in general and issue a number of recommendations, including, again, after 1968, recommending the expeditious development of a collision avoidance system and implementation on all civil aircraft. Also of note, in July of 1969, was the NTSB's first ever recommendation on another collision avoidance technology, positive train control, to prevent train-to-train collisions and to prevent incursions, is basically a train slamming right into a work zone and hitting people. We issued a recommendation on positive train control, so numerous over the decades, over 50 years, that I could hardly count. It was many, many times, sometimes 6 times a year. For 50 years, we issued that recommendation. In 1969, there was no standard for positive train control. There was no group that got together and agreed on a written document of a standard for positive train control. It didn't even exist. Did not exist. But we recommended it. And guess what? Yes, it took us 50 years to get there. But Congress mandated it. They mandated it because of our recommendation, but in between 1969 and when it was mandated and fully implemented in 2020, over 300 people died and 6,200 people injured, seriously injured. Death after death after death. It wasn't the first time we issued a recommendation where technology did not exist or there was no standard in writing. Let's just review 1968 when seatbelts came into play. We issued our first seatbelt recommendation, now knowing 450,000 lives were saved. Think about the tremendous pushback on seatbelts at that time. Nobody wanted to wear a seatbelt or install them in a car. But we were right out there championing it. 1970, we issued a recommendation to rapidly shut down failed pipelines, now known as automatic and remote control shutoff valves. Didn't exist in 1970, but we investigated 15-something explosions, including one at a daycare that killed so many people. So many people over the years. Excess flow valves is another one, to shut off distribution pipelines before a house exploded. We kept after that one time and again. An excess flow valve didn't even exist at the time. Ground proximity warning systems, 1971. Wind shear detection technology, 1973. Car seats in passenger vehicles, 1983. Runway incursion technology, or ASDX, 1990. Direct pilot alerting, we're still after it, 1990. Automatic emergency braking, forward collision warning, 95. Fuel inerting systems, 1996. Electronic stability control, 2002. Advanced speed limiting technology, 2011. Connected vehicle technology, and thank you for Member Graham for championing connected vehicle technology. First recommendation, 2012, didn't exist. Drug and alcohol detection technology, whether it's DADS or driver monitoring, it didn't exist, 2012. If not us, then who? Every single time we have championed technology to push for lives saved. And when we issue a recommendation and FAA decides we can't do it this way, we need to find another one. Mr. Hoyt, is there an option for FAA to say, well, we can't do it this way, but we are going to do it this way?
Yes, if a recipient has another alternative plan or solution for a recommendation, they can propose it to us and we'll consider it. And if we think it's appropriate, we will close it acceptable alternate action.
Thank you very much. Yeah. Member Graham.
Thank you, Chair. I want to talk about technology now, too. I've been a big proponent of technology to help as a backup system out there. TCAS was a big deal when it came out. It has matured over time to be a really good thing, and it has saved my rear end a few times over the years with the resolution advisory. Unfortunately, in this situation, this accident, it had limitations where it wouldn't work or wouldn't be effective. I think we've gotten to the bottom of that. So I want to talk a little bit about ACAS and ADSB-in going forward here. I think it's important to point out I'm a believer in ADSB-in, but I'm only a believer if we do it right and how it's integrated into the cockpit. Just to have it in is worthless, but if we do it right, what would that look like, Captain Stone?
It would require that there be directional targets and that it's in a location on the cockpit in the primary field of view of the pilot so that they could see it. And also the audio for the alert integrated into their audio system so they could hear it.
Yeah, so I would agree with that. You know, what else would be good tied in with that? Would it be directional alert, range, altitude?
Yes, and one of our recommendations, we actually were asking that more information be given to traffic alerts, so that, and that's the first step in this, in developing situational awareness as to where the traffic is, where the conflict is, and we're recommending that be enhanced beyond what it is today.
I would agree. We've seen in the past just to have ADSB-in and catch a can to our IIC, Mr. Banning, that just having it without an alert or a visual alert was useless, was it not? And unfortunate. So let's talk a little bit about ACAS. Is ACAS, does it incorporate ADSB-in?
Yes, it does.
Okay. So is that just one of the inputs to ACAS? Would that be correct?
Yes, ACAS can function off of interrogation and reply, just like TCAS does, but it has the ability to actually look at the geometry, which TCAS really doesn't look at geometry, so.
Correct, correct. Is there any iteration of ACAS out there that would allow for the ADSB-in to make the clock code range and altitude callouts?
There is no ACAS that's specified to do that today, but it could be.
Could be. Might be neat if we're going to use it, ADSB-in with it. It would be nice for the crew. So these systems are great, but they're not the primary means of traffic deconfliction in most cases. Is that correct?
That is correct. It's primarily air traffic controlled separation and could be visuals, which could include visual separation.
Correct. Yeah, and in this case, this unfortunately was an incorrect visual separation, I would say, on behalf of the tower and the aircrew in this case. And yet, if we had some of this technology in the future, maybe this accident doesn't happen. But it was a breakdown initially in the visual separation. I see my time's up. Thank you.
Member Inman.
I appreciate, Chair, you bringing up the PTC, and it actually resonates with me a lot. And I would go back to whenever I was the Chief of Staff of the U.S. Department of Transportation, 2020, we actually got that implemented. But it also reminds me that it was another recommendation, and unfortunately from the Colgan air crash in 2009 that had been outstanding, the pilot record database that the NTSB had recommended. And it took from 2009 until 2019 to get the FAA to adopt that. And I will say this, and being on the receiving end of that, and I'm going to speechify a little bit, but it's going to take everyone in this room and everyone that's watching. I think we have a receptive administration, a receptive secretary, a receptive FAA administrator, but you have to continually put that in front of them. And that's how PTC, that's how PRD, the Colgan families became huge advocates, and that's how they were successful in getting that done. So it's a good message to know that we don't give up, but no one else can give up either. So I just want to mention that. Let me go back to see and avoid. Are pilots trained differently to see and avoid versus a helicopter pilot versus a fixed wing pilot?
Not particularly.
Is it not just basic knowledge that you don't hit something? Sorry.
Yes.
I mean, isn't that the core fundamental is don't hit something else? And yet we're using this terminology to see, Rocky, I see you back there laughing a little bit, but I know it's not funny, but it is. It's so ludicrous, it's kind of ironic, I think. Am I wrong in that?
I agree.
If I could add, I mean, in order to avoid something, you have to first see it and see and avoid. And I think we identified some challenges in this case for that.
I just wonder why we're continuing to let, and I don't disagree that the technology can help avoid part of that, but I go back to we train people to see and avoid or request visual separation. It seems like it's just meant for the sake of expediency rather than it is actual safety. Is that a good assumption?
I think staff determined in this case that there was an over-reliance on it in order to ensure the efficient flow of traffic in the terminal area.
So it's more about getting the planes efficiently where they need to be.
We believe there was a drift in operating practices due to that pressure, yeah.
I think, shouldn't it be getting them there live versus efficiently?
Yes.
So it's a little rhetorical, I know, sorry. In regard to night vision goggles, is there ever a time whenever a helicopter crew would advise the air traffic control, or they would let them know that we're in a training, either in a training flight, a proficiency flight, or using night vision goggles?
Right now, there's no requirement to do that.
But we've identified increased risk, obviously, when helicopters are using night vision goggles and operating in a complex airspace.
There's advantages and disadvantages in using night vision goggles, and all the operators, all the helicopter operators in the National Capital Region use them because they think it's advantageous.
But it doesn't, they view it's advantageous because they're able to better discern oncoming traffic, or because we've seen from our visualization, it significantly reduces your field of view.
Right, for helicopter operations, you're flying at low altitude, so you're not just looking for other traffic, you're looking for ground obstacles and other aircraft that are lower to the ground, other helicopters. So the night vision goggles are a big advantage in that environment.
Dr. Brandel, did you have something you want to add?
I was just going to say, yeah, operating without them would likely increase the risk for helicopter crews, but we have made other recommendations that would reduce the risk of collision in the area, such as relocating the route so they don't have to spot oncoming airliners and increasing the use of collision avoidance technology.
Okay. I see I'm out of time.
Thank you. Rocky, does American Airlines have ADSB on 302 of their A321 aircraft?
Yes, they do.
That was cockpit display.
And it has a cockpit display in the pilot's primary field of view, yes.
Yes, I flew jump seat and was able to watch it in operation. Tim, you're a pilot. Do you have ADSB-in?
Yes, ma'am, I do.
And you have a receiver that you bought, it was a Garmin, probably a couple $100, right?
I think about 400, but yes.
And what does it provide you?
So the interesting thing, I'm not flying a 121 airline.
That's right.
But for me, I do fly a 1931 biplane. Okay, so this airplane has no electrical system whatsoever. I have to turn the propeller by hand to start it. But for $400, I bought an ADSB-in unit that Velcros to my panel, and using my phone in my ear, if I get traffic, I can hear the direction of that traffic, how far it is away from me, a clock position, and its altitude.
Great. Olivia, can you pull up the PowerPoint slide that I had sent to you all on the 48 seconds? All right, so what we're looking at here on your right is had PAT 25, they had a 4-flight. Do you have 4-flight, Mr. LeBaron?
Yes, I do.
So you have 4-flight with ADSB-in?
Yes.
And so this, had they gotten that alert and had it been integrated in the helicopter, would have had 48 seconds before collision to do something. We know for a fact, or we know from our analysis, that they didn't realize that plane was there on the left. There was nothing. On the left here, we have flight 5342, and we did a simulation. They're barely even, I mean, they're just circling now from the Wilson Bridge. 59 seconds before collision with ADSB, and they would have gotten an alert instead of 19 seconds, correct? Anyone?
Yes. That is correct.
That is correct. So would you rather have 19 seconds or 59 seconds?
Well, I'm not sure who the question's to, but I'd rather have the 59 seconds.
That's correct. That's right. I mean, look how far out they are. That is our simulation. So let me tell you, with respect to ADSB, the NTSB has recommended ADSB out and in supported airborne traffic advisory systems that include oral and visual alerting functions 17 times since 2006 on Part 121, Part 135, and general aviation aircraft. In 2008, the board took a position in response to an FAA notice of proposed rulemaking which required ADSB out. That the NTSB expressed concern that the FAA did not plan to require ADSB-in capability. We stated the safety board believes that the benefits of ADSB technology warrant rapid adoption. We stated our concerns in that letter. We said to FAA at the time said they had not identified as a requirement for maintaining safety and efficiency of NAS operations. We told that we disagreed, said their assessment was incorrect, and that equipage of aircraft with ADSB-in capability will provide an immediate and substantial contribution to safety, especially during operations in and around airports. We went on to say ADSB-in provides a ready method of sending warning information to pilots, providing confirmation of clearances, on and on. It is a backup, because why? Humans make errors. We know this. Why do you have technology? I mean, Member Inman talked about, you know, they implemented positive train control. Guess who wrote it in legislation? That'd be me. Why? Because of your work, over and over and over again. And so we went on to continue recommending ADSB-in. I wonder where we would be today if they actually did it when ADSB out was required. Where would we be today? Perhaps we wouldn't even be here. 59 seconds, 48 seconds. We might not have to be here. So my time is up, but I'm going to come back to this. Member Graham. Member Inman. Okay, just along those lines, I do want to stress, when we're thinking about where we are today, I want to read the last two responses from FAA, and it predates this administration. Honestly, thank you to Secretary Duffy, who has been a partner from day one on this. You know, when your first day on the job is a devastating tragedy, that stays with you for the rest of your tenure, if not your life. And what did he do? He committed to ADSB-in. And the last administration, June 26, 2023, a response from then acting administrator of the FAA, Polly Trottenberg, was the FAA's this is to us, the FAA's Air Traffic Organization and Aviation Safety Organization met to discuss this recommendation and review all guidance and requirements associated at the time in response to Ketchikan, Parts 91 and Part 135 and ADSB out and in. We determined that our current ADSB requirements adequately address the needs of aviation safety and will not pursue any additional ADSB requirements at this time. And then we had another one, the last from them was November 6, 2024, Mike Whitaker, response to us saying, based on our discussions, it has been determined that our current ADSB requirements continue to adequately address the needs of aviation safety. The FAA will not pursue additional ADSB operator requirements at this time. In other words, they were okay without and not in. For those that are watching, that's like having a conversation with a wall. In order to communicate two entities, out, you got to receive in. You got to take that information in. Now, in this case, you know, and I might be at 5 minutes. Do you want to? In this case, I want to ask one thing about TSB. If this aircraft had ADSB-in, and we know that the Army's helicopter had ADSB out would have been on, but it was programmed incorrectly on installation, so it was basically not transmitting out. But even if, and I've seen comments, it wouldn't have mattered. I've seen this in the press. It wouldn't have mattered if it had ADSB-in, because that aircraft, that helicopter, ADSB out wasn't working. Do you agree with that? Am I going to ask Mr. McKinney or am I going to ask Mr. Chihoun?
So the helicopter was not transmitting ADSB out, but with the TSB service, that would provide the helicopter's position to ADSB-in displays.
So in other words, even though the helicopter wasn't transmitting out, if that aircraft had ADSB-in, it would have gotten information. Is TSB everywhere in the airspace?